Okay, so hello and welcome to everybody who's studying with us now. We're at the third meeting, and we're going to just pick up where we left off last time in the Idra, which was, if you remember, we had this androgynous male and female, the Adam, and they were just separated from one another. And we were talking about that it's a sort of traumatic experience, but the Ari will get more into that. But just in terms of the Idra of the Zohar, the picture is that the male was put to sleep, which we call the dormita. This slumber we call the dormita. It's like the Spanish word dormir. It means sleep, the slumber. So the male Zeir Anpin, the God in the male, calling him a male, he's asleep, and she is awake, and she's just been separated. She's feeling this separation, and in the Idra it said he hid her or concealed her. The word is atzna'ala. It means he sort of hid her, concealed her, as I said, for her day. And now we're just going to complete the Idra to see when her day is. And this Idra description might be a little different than we'll see in the Ari, but I just like to complete that. So let me put the screen on. Just one moment. And this, okay, so we're just going to finish off this Idra here. Here we go. We're starting right here. I'm pointing at it with my cursor. So this is I also really like this particular picture that the Idra depicts. Uveshata de Baal lemel Shabbata. This is when Shabbat is supposed to come, okay? It's like Friday afternoon, right before Shabbat. This, of course, is the first Shabbat, the first, it's like in terms of our chronology, our biblical chronology, so we're on Friday. And in terms of the date, and we're going to see this again in the Ari, but let's just already fill it in. Basically, this is the first day of Rosh Hashanah, because according to how we understand something Chazal say is somewhere in the Talmud, so the world was created on the 25th of Elul, Chafei Elul, which that'll be, I think, next, according to what Chaim said, no, we'll be on Motzei Chafei Elul, I think, next time we meet. So the world was created then, and then the sixth day comes out on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. That never happens again in the Jewish calendar, but that's how it happened the first time. So this whole drama that we're hearing about here of basically the creation of human beings is taking place the sixth day of creation, which is the first day of Rosh Hashanah. So now we're on that first day of Rosh Hashanah, and it's almost Shabbat. And so what was the Adam doing? Now, this is after the Nesirah. This is after they've been separated. So he's already, woken up from his nap. What's he doing? Havabari ruchin b'shedin ve'il'ulim. He's busy creating spirits and demons, and I don't know, some other word for like, they're like, what do you call those things in English in the desert when they're like turning around really, really quickly? What are they called? Anybody? Like, no, it's like no, they're like
whirlwinds.
Yeah, like whirlwinds. Whirlwinds, tumbleweeds, or whirlwinds. So Elulin, all the different spirits, they're spirits. They have they have to do with spirit, with air, with wind. Elulin, that's a certain one. These three words, Ruchin, Shedin, Elulin, those are different types of spirits, okay? What do we mean by, so Elulin, they're like those whirlwinds, that's their nature of these spirits. Just I'm saying on to the side sort of that there's a whole, especially in the Zohar, there's a whole science and wisdom of the spirits and the basically disembodied beings. Spirits, first and foremost, mean entities that exist that do not have bodies, okay, that do not have bodies. Very important, how can I say, very important piece of our psychology and understanding of our lives, which is basically forgotten by Western society. I would also just say in a sort of side comment that here in Israel, I am the chairman of a center which is called Wustatsega, the Center for Culturally Adapted Psychotherapy. And this is a center that's headed by a very, very dear friend and student of mine, Yeshitu Shmuel. She came from Ethiopia when she was 7, really incredible, charismatic woman. And basically the idea of this center is to not only offer psychotherapy for people from other cultures that is adapted to their culture, but to study and research the language used for mental health in these cultures. And I actually do with her from time to time here in Israel, we do a workshop on spirits where I bring the Kabbalistic tradition, like from the Zohar mainly, on spirits, and she brings from the Beta Yisrael tradition, the tradition of the Ethiopian Jews. And there's a lot of similarities and a lot of differences, but the common denominator between them is the sense that we as human beings, we're not alone here on this, in this reality. We sort of share it with these disembodied beings that we call spirits. And there's actually, especially in how Beta Israel sees it, the spirits are not inherently bad in some way. They can even be useful, but there is competition going on for territory between us and them. We sort of are in the same territory and we need to compete for them. And I mean, we found that this language of spirits for people in some sort of mental or psychological crisis, this language works very well also for Western people in terms of explaining to a person what they're going through. But that's a whole nother thing. But anyway, where did they come from? Where did these spirits come from? So this is what Adam, the male, that's what he was busy doing, you know, instead of making cholent or whatever, cleaning his house, he was like busy making these spirits. I always think of it as he sort of wanted to imitate God. God had just created him, and now being in that image, so I think he was trying to create, but okay, so he had created like their spirits, but he didn't get around to making their bodies. And before he could finish with them, okay, so he's sitting there playing with his spirit Lego or whatever it is, and all of a sudden, so she comes, the matrinuta, in other words, the woman comes, you know, betikunaha, perfect, you know, with jewelry, perfectly dressed. And like she, betikunaha, I mean, I guess, you know, usually we say they were not dressed, they were naked in Gan Eden, but here she's betikunaha. And tikunaha in Aramaic, her tikunim, that means jewelry or clothes or whatever. Anyway, so she comes like totally ready and she just sits down in front of him. Beshata diativat kame, when she sat down before him, anachlon le'inun beryan v'laish dalimu. He just totally forgot about all those creations that he was in the middle of doing, and that's why they were never completed. That's why they were supposed to get bodies. I mean, they were on the way, but he just like forgot it totally. He was totally distracted, and because of that they were in a non-complete state, these spirits. Okay, and then the Idra goes on to say, Kevan de matrinuta yatva imalka, since the queen is sitting with the king, Vidhabru apin ba'anpin, and they've now connected face to face. This is the first moment that they're actually seeing each other face to face, because don't forget that until now they were back to back as an androgynous. So there was some sort of two entities there, but because they were in this back to back position, they'd never really seen each other. They'd never seen each other. So this is the first time they're seeing each other. And since they connect face to face, man ya'ul beinahu, who could come between them? Man hu diyikrav bahadaihu, who could come close to them? V'charit chabru, and when they connected, itbasmu dabeda. They got inebriated, like intoxicated, high, sweetened, one with the other. Yom Dechule Itbasem. This is the day that all is mitbasem. Again, the word hitbasmu to mitbasem, it means intoxicated, high, sweetened, ameliorated, or whatever that word was. And it's that day is Shabbat, of course. Uvegin kach, and because of this, and I'm sure you'll remember this from last time, itbasmu dinim da beda. So the din, the judgments, their powerfulness was softened, one in the other, because remember, by him it's in the head and the dinim, and then the chesed is lower down, and she's the opposite. So again, once again, it's the dinim, it's this homeopathic thing that the din is getting sweetened in other din, the tztaknu ilain v'tataim, and that which is above and that which is below was put in place. Okay, so this is, as I said, the picture of the Idra, what's going on, basically first day of Rosh Hashanah, right before it's Shabbat. This is where they meet after they were, separated one from the other, and this will be the base of what we're going to now study with the Ari. Does anybody want to ask or say something before we begin the Ari?
At the risk of sounding obvious, didn't a little thing just happen here where we went from a concept of masculine deity coming with left arm from sky, so to speak, and lifting up Shekhinah, and then slipping right arm under Shekhinah. So that was like one God entity and another God entity, and now we've got Adam and presumably Chava. You've got like these two humans that it just culminated with, or at least they met and got together. Was there a little switcheroo there?
No, it's good you pointed this out, and the answer is no, because the thing is, and this is a lot of the Zoharic texts on Adam not only can be read, but have to be read sort of on two planes simultaneously, because the story of Adam and Chava becomes for the Zohar also the story of Kuchabrichu and Shekhinah. And, and it's, at some point they split and become two different narratives, but especially at the first stages, like now, it's the same story. So it's Adam and Chava, but it's also Zeir Anpin and Nukva. It's also Kuchabrichu and Shekhinah, the divine male and female. And as I said many, many times, this is because the Idra and the Zohar take so seriously what the Torah says, that B'Tselem Elohim bara otam, B'Tselem Elohim bara Adam, that Adam, human beings, were created in the image of Elohim, of God. So also our history, at least till a certain point, it's the same. It's the same. One tells the story of the other when we look at the human and we look at the divine. Okay? Anybody else want to comment or say something?
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the similarity with the spirits that Adam was creating, and especially the terms of like Ruchim and heirs that I'm familiar with from Latin America, where there's like 13 different airs, and their emotions, their like spirit, our emotions take on this like air and the spirit. There's the emotion of jealousy, there's the emotion of shame and all of these things. So it's just interesting. Those are called in Latin America, los aires, the airs.
Airs. So that's
creating airs, these entities.
So that is totally the Hebrew words, because the Hebrew words is ruach, which means, ruach and ilulim, all these words, except for shed, which we translate as demon, they're all air words, and they can be the cause of what we call, in our language, emotion. But a lot of times it's totally, a lot of cultures in the world, have this language is extremely developed. And then in Western culture, Freud and then Western psychology came around, and all that was like booted out. All that language was booted out. So yeah, it's amazing how similar they are. Okay, so I'll open it up again soon, of course, but let's go on now to the Ari. And let me just say, before we begin we're talking about the teachings of Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, who lived in the 16th century. And this is especially a good time to be reading this, because very soon, in another week, I think, it's going to be the 400th Yortzeit of the Ari's devoted student, Reb Chaim Vital. Reb Chaim Vital's 400th Yortzeit is going to be happening very soon. There's an academic congress on that going to happen here in Israel on Reb Chaim Vital. And actually, a friend and student of mine just published a 400-page book in Hebrew on Reb Chaim Vital and his initiation process with the Ari, comparing that to other, initiation traditions in Eastern and Western cultures. So there's a lot going on around this. It's really Reb Chaim Vital. It's just amazing. The Ari died very young. He died at, I think, 36 or 38. And basically, he was in Egypt, and then for the last couple years of his life, he came to Tzfat. He was first in Yerushalayim, then he went to Tzfat where he was teaching, and Reb Chaim Vital learned by him like a year and a half or a year and 7 months. And from this, we have this like amazing corpus, which, known as Kitvei Ari, the Lurianic writings. The Ari himself wrote very little. There are writings of him himself. They're very different than Chaim Vital, not in terms of content, but in terms of writing style. But most of what we have, which gave birth to the Ari's teachings, is all from Chaim Vital, and it's hundreds of pages and dense and thick and endless, full of endless, infinite ideas. It's totally, to me, inconceivable by human terms or understanding how so much wisdom could have been given over in such a short time. There were other traditions of the Lurianic teachings, the main one being somebody called Rabbi Yisrael Sarug, but usually when you hear something Luria, it's going to be from that which Reb Chaim Vital transmitted to us, and he was very, very, extremely faithful in his writing to what he heard from his teaching. Sometimes they begin to say, the academics, they like to say that, probably this wasn't the Ari, and Reb Chaim Vital made it up. A lot of it, it's his ideas, not the Ari. I'm sure there'll be a lot of that at that conference. But if you read it carefully, if he has the smallest doubt or question whether his teacher said exactly that, he always writes that. And if it's his own idea, he'll say, but I thought. He is extremely, extremely devoted and faithful to his teacher's teachings. So we need to give him kavod and respect, because of him, we have these teachings. So this is now what we're going to do, and probably this is what we'll be doing, for the remainder of our meeting. We're going to go into the Ari's expansion of this Zoharic picture that we just learned, or the picture from the Idra. And we're also going to, of course, see how that's related to Rosh Hashanah. And of course, it's not just going to be what the Ari was saying about this in particular, but his understanding of how things work in general. Uleva'er hamamar hazeh, and to explain this quote. He's talking about the quote from the Zohar of the Nisira, the separation. We need to explain the matter of the feminine in all her details. Uvifrat be'inyan hanisira, and specifically regarding the nisira, the separation. Hine. So he says, okay, now I want to give you the original picture. Bat chalata atzilut, at the beginning of the Atzilut, the emanation of creation, Haya Zeir Anpin b'vchinat Vav K'tzavot Levad. Zeir Anpin was only 6, v'hanekeva Hayta b'chinat Asirit, and the feminine was the 10th. Besod Nekuda Ktana, in the mystery of a small point, Klula Miyud, including 10, V'lo Haya ba Partzuf Shalem. But she was not an entire partsuf. So I assume that very little of this made sense. Let me explain it. One of the Ari's major innovations was to take sort of the family of the Zohar, or the Idra. Who is the family? It's Abba, Ima, Ben, Bat. Mother, father, mother, son, and daughter, who are also husband and wife, and brother and sister, okay? So, and also grandfather. Let's put grandfather in there. But grandfather, he's really not gendered. Grandfather, we call him Atika, the ancient one. So we really can't call, when we're speaking of Atika, we can't refer to Atika as male or female. But we say, because of the old language, we call him Saba, or Atika, which means ancient one or grandfather. So that's the family. And the Ari said, each member of this family is what the Ari called a partsuf. Of course, the word he also has from the Zohar. Partsuf is translated as face, but actually in the Ari's use of the word, partsuf means an entire, fully developed body-soul. And what is an entire, fully developed body-soul for the Ari? It means that this partsuf, I have to start using that word, partsuf, is comprised of 10 sfirot, all the 10 sfirot, okay? From Keter to Malchut. That is what makes a partsuf whole and complete. However, having said that, not all of the partsufim are immediately created in this fashion. That is to say that they're all 10 sfirot. And forget now Atika and Abba and Ima. We're putting them off on the side. Right now, we're going to just zoom in on the son and daughter, Zeir Anpin. We call the son Zeir Anpin, means the small face. Not going to get into why right now. And the feminine, Nukva. Zeir Anpin and Nukva, Kutshabrichu and Shechina. So when they are created, Zeir Anpin, the male, he's only 6. He is the 6 sfirot between Chesed and Yesod. He is lacking his mochin, his higher consciousness, the 3 higher sfirot, Keter, Chochma, Bina. That's, anybody who's familiar with the terms, Katnuta mochin, Gadlusa mochin, this is where it comes from, because Zeir Anpin lacks mochin, and he also lacks his malchut, his 10th sphira. That's Zeir Anpin. And again, I'm just giving this as information now. In the Ari, this is huge amounts of analyzing it and getting into such high resolution that, believe me, you don't want to know about it. And Nukva, the feminine, she is the 10th. She is one nikuda, 1 point. If anybody's familiar with the Ayala and the Zohar, where she's compared to a doe. So this is all connected to that. But anyway, she's 1 little point, just the 10th. However, that 1 point has all 10 within it. That's what he's saying. She's one, but she's only one, the 10th. That's why she's the completion of everything. And her one point has all 10 in it. Okay, but neither of them now is a full partsuf. She's lacking the other 9 sfirot fully developed, and he's lacking his mochin and her. Okay, that's the picture. Again, I don't want to get into it too much, all the details and significance. I just wanted to have for you that picture. That is the 2 of them when they're first created. But we have one more piece that we need to know to understand this. V'liyot ki hanekeva hayta b'hatchala mekabelet he'arata al yedei zer anpin lachen hayta gru'a mimenu. Now, what he says is that at the beginning, this is like a transmission here. In this family of Abba, of Saba, Atika, Abba, Ima, Ben, and Bat, in this family, so one gives light to the one after it. Or, you know, the Atika is giving light to all, then Abba and Ima, father and mother, they pretty much receive equally, and then they give it to him, to the son, and then he transmits the light to her. And the Ari says, this situation in which she is dependent on her light, on him, not good. This keeps her, this puts her in a lower position than him. And she therefore was incapable of developing into a full partsuf due to her dependence on him for his light. That impedes her evolution as a partsuf. Ve'az, and due to this situation, hutzrach ha'ma'atzil ha'elyon lahapil tardima la'adam dazer anpin. So this is the reason now for the Ari why the supreme emanator, ha'ma'atzil ha'elyon, one thing I really like about the Kabbalah is it has a lot of names for God besides God. Which is not my personal favorite name at all. And one of them is Hamatzil Ha'elyon, the supreme emanator, the one who's responsible for all of this, for emanating all of this. So the supreme emanator had to put the male part to sleep in order to get rid of him in the line of transmission, because now we need to focus on her and let her develop and evolve, not dependent on him. And it gets much more complicated than this, but what can I do? This is what we are reading. Va'az zer anpin levado b'v'chinat nishmato. I'm just going to read this from the beginning to the end and then explain it. So don't worry. So then Zeir Anpin alone, the male part, in terms of his soul, mistaleket mimenu ba'et hatardima v'hashena. So his soul now leaves him while he's asleep. What happens when a person goes to sleep? Where is our waking consciousness? So they see that as a soul. And basically, in the ancient traditions, sleeping is, the soul is leaving the body. And in the Zohar, for example, not only. So there's many, many descriptions of what's going on with the soul at night. Dreams are just sort of a echo of all the different things the soul might be experiencing during this out of the body time that we call sleep. So also Zeir Anpin now, who's been put to sleep, his soul has risen into the heaven, let's say. Okay, it went up there. Why? What is the point of all of this? What is the soul busy doing when it leaves the body at night, at least according to the Mekubalim, the Kabbalists? So the soul ola lamala b'sod mayim nukvin el ima ila'ah. The soul is ascending above, according to be feminine waters for higher mother, for supreme mother, for the great mother. Okay, I have to explain this also. We are human beings. Our work, according to the Zohar and very much according to the Ari, one of our main functions in prayer, in sleep, and even in death, but basically in any situation when our soul leaves the body, it's not just to like have, out of the body experiences because we're, something or another has been done with bodily consciousness. For the Mekubalim, the soul rises above and becomes feminine waters. In other words, we're trying all the time to create unions, connections between the partsufim. So when the soul rises, that means to say leaves the body, the soul is what creates the feminine waters so that she is ready and wanting to couple. So here, what he's saying is when Zeir Anpin, the soul of Zeir Anpin, who's sleeping, the male, goes above, the soul enters Ima, the mother, and she is aroused and now wants to be with Abba. Okay? Why is it that the souls, it's like the souls of the children are what awaken the parents to want to couple, to give birth or create the souls, those very souls of the children. And you don't, talking about parents and children, it's a metaphor. Don't only understand it as parents and children. Okay, I just want to finish the paragraph and then I'll let you ask questions or say stuff. I'm aware this is probably a lot of very new and different material for most of us. So this is all what I said, that the soul rises el ima ila'ah, to higher mother. And the Ari says, kederech ha'adam, just like in daily life, a person, hamafkid nishmato biyad malchut letzorach mayim nukvin shaba, k'mavur le'el, בפסוק בידך אפקיד רוחי הנאמר בלילה כשאדם ישן על מיטתו. I'm just going to explain this. When we go to sleep, when the Kabbalist, when a Mekubal goes to sleep, so the Mekubal is thinking about the following. The Mekubal is sending his or her soul up to the Shekhinah. And my soul, if I happen to be a Mekubal and happen to have kavanah for this stuff at night, so my soul goes basically into the womb of the Shekhinah, where she arouses her to want to be with her lover, Zeir Anpin. This is how it works. And the verse for this, which we say before we go to sleep in Kriyat Shema L'Mitah, that is to say, those people who say Kriyat Shema L'Mitah say this verse, Biyadcha Afkid Ruchi, which means, in your hands I place my soul. So the Zohar reads it, not in Biyadcha in Hebrew, that's the masculine. In your hands, God, I place my soul. But the Zohar reads it in the feminine. In your hands, her. Your hands feminine, I place my soul, because my soul is now left the body to be with you with the Shekhinah, in order to awaken her, feminine waters, so that she'll be with him, and then we'll have the zivug, which the zivug means the mating, which brings about great flow and great sustenance and great blessing and great freedom for all sentient beings. That's basically the thing. And just to complete it, what's going on here is now in this very first time picture of Adam and Chava, or the cosmic male and female, his soul, Dafka, is going up to his mother, because we need to bring about a new flow, a new energy into the world. And I'll just, tell you where it's going. This new energy that's going to be created as a result of the unification of Abba and Ima, of mother and father, this is what's now going to build her, going to fill her out as a complete partsuf. As for his story, how he gets mofin, he needs more time. We're not going to get into that now. So I'm going to stop it because maybe someone wants to ask or say something. I know this is a bit complicated.
How do you say that in the feminine, the biachad of kiruchi?
I don't hear well enough. Whoever's speaking, can you
Oh, yeah. I was just saying, how do you say biachad of kiruchi in the feminine?
It would be, I guess, biadech afkid ruchi. Instead of biadcha, it would be biadech afkid ruchi. And that's how they understand it.
So Abraham, you specifically used the word build her. And is that what, I mean, Reb Zalman used to talk about this all the time, binyan malchut. Is that what we're talking about?
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
That's why
Okay.
I don't know how well it works in English, but yeah, I'm just translating from the Hebrew.
Yeah, I mean, you used the word specifically, and I just thought that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's our intention, when we go to sleep, and I think there's also that you raise up the mayin nukvim with prayer too. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's our action.
Yeah, totally. Because prayer is also supposed to be some degree of an out-of-the-body experience. In other words, the very fact that I am devoting time to, prayer rather than washing dishes, driving my car, et cetera, all the bodily functions or material world functions is already supposed to take me a bit out of the body and more into the soul. And anytime that happens, we want to do mind nukvin. We want to become mind nukvin. Basically, that's what it is.
I had one other question did he specifically use the word nishmat as opposed to another name for soul? He used or does that not, he wasn't talking about a level of soul or anything like that?
No. In this case, I wouldn't get into level of souls. It's,
okay.
No.
That was I just heard that and it just clicked with
No.
me.
It's a question when learning Ari, you always have to ask it because sometimes he's going into such detail of the different levels of soul that, it could be significant. But here it just means the soul leaving the body because of sleep in a very general sense.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So I'm going to, wait, somebody else trying to say something here?
This is Vera. I have a question. And I'm just going to ask, but if we go back to that idea of, Hashem created them, which is created male and female. And if we think also of that sense of ruach, or the spirits, or those beings that are non-corporeal, I don't know. And the development of this, and as they turn to each other, or, they're back to back and then they become face to face. Is there any way of understanding this construct from being the multiplicity of Adam and Chava within, like, in this world, human creation, like the multiplicity of humanity within each person, and this idea of, we have, or one has two sides at least, and then, but they are in constant back to back until they become face to face. Like, is there any way of understanding it that way, or just not at all?
Let me make certain that I understood you, that you're saying that in addition to looking at this as a description of the relationship between male and female, in other words, two, can we also use this terminology, or is this terminology also used to describe a person's relationship with themselves? Is this right? Did I get it right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so the answer is absolutely, absolutely, 100%. We sort of use this model of two, or male and female, because it's sort of easier to get it. For instance, in the Ari, it's very developed. All the stages of relationship between back to back and face to face. Back to back, you're sort of starting from there. You don't see the other at all. And then, then it goes through all sorts of stages, face to back to face, and till eventually they reach face to face. It's sort of, those two are describing the two extremes of the continuum. And there's many, many, many stations and relationships on the way. And you don't always, as we know from our own lives, I'm certain, you don't always go forward in this process. And there is a lot of, definitely, this also becomes at some point a person's relationship with themselves. In other words, you can be back to back to yourself. You can be face to face to yourself, 100%. It's an interesting way of looking at things, and who is face to face or back, who is the face, who is the back in one person? Is it my conscious and my unconscious, for example? Many different, is it my male side and my female side? There's many ways of looking at this, but yeah, good you mentioned it.
Thank you.
Okay, one more if there is, and if not, we're just going to go ahead and more of this stuff, so you'll have what to think about over the next week. Okay, so we're going to go on here. Was that somebody trying to speak? Okay, I don't know. Okay, so let's go. So, okay, this is what I was saying before. Through the ascension of these feminine waters, that is the soul of the sleeping Zeir Anpin, the sleeping male God, Mizdavgin Abba ve'ima, father and mother couple, Umin he'erat hazivugahu bonim u'metaknim et hanekeva. So from the light of that coupling, so we build, here's Sarle, you see the word specifically, bonim, we build and evolve, put in place the feminine, umoridin ba mochin acherin, ba'ota nekuda sheba, and we give her other mochin, other minds or consciousness, not ones that she receives from him as it was in the past. Sheba, v'nigdelet, and she grows. V'nitvasvim batet nekudot acherot, and all the other 9 points. In other words, the additional 9 sfirot. Remember, she was only 1. She are added to her. V'nasa partzuf shalem diyud sfirot, and she becomes a complete partzuf of 10 sfirot. Ve'omedet imo achor ba'achor mina chazeh shebo lamata. And now she stands with him. They are not face to face here. Okay, now this is very important. Even though they are separated, and I hope I'm not confusing this, and this is happening after the separation, we'll see as we go, but they are standing, they're not face to face yet. They are standing back to back. Mina chazeh shebo ulamata, from his chest down. V'habinyan hazeh, and this entire building, na'asa yedei hapalat durmita al Zeir Anpin. All this was enabled by the durmita, the slumber falling on Zeir Anpin, the male. So just to get the picture here, the way they're standing, they cannot yet be face to face. And in a minute, we're going to understand why. But just so you should have the picture, they are standing now. We will learn the Idra. And the Idra took us right to the end. In the Ari, he sort of fills out the story. So way before they're facing face to face, they're still back to back. And she comes up to his chest. She is not the same height as him. in the way of seeing of the Zohar, Idra, Ari all the time then. In fact, the fact that women are often not as tall as men in the average, I don't even know if that's true, but assuming it is, led them to create sort of diagrams of the Partsufim in which she is always lower than him. In other words, he's taller than her. However, I should just say that the Ari does not want to leave her in this state, and over the course of history, or over the course of each day, or over the course of a person's life, the main thrust of their spiritual work, of a person's spiritual work, is to cause her to grow and become of equal height to him. It's a whole, story on its own. Just I'm telling you that so you should know. But what we need to know now is the picture that we see now, in which they're standing back to back. If you didn't understand anything else, that's the main thing to know. They're standing back to back, and now he's going to explain why. Vihine sibat hitavkutan ata bevchinat achor ba'achor. The reason for them being back to back, Masheloya can be tchila b'hiyota besud nekuda kanal, not as it was at the beginning when she was, much smaller, before she had grown. I'm not going to translate this now. I don't want to get it too complicated. Hatamhu, the reason for the back to back, that's what I want us to reason to know, is kihine kol bechinat achorayim hem dinim vehem shlemot Elohim. So this is very connected now to what Vera brought up before. When we're looking now at our own bodies, at our own body soul, we are a front and a back. Our front is considered like chesed, and our back is din. And our front would be like the name Yud He Vav He, and our back is the name Elohim. That is how it is. Now, din is where the klipot, the shells, the husks, the external forces, the leeches who are drawing or sucking our energy, they leech on to din. That's where they connect, okay? And so the klipot, they can suck juice, they can suck our juice from the back. Now think about it. I said before, when I was responding to Vera, I said maybe it's what is the front and the back? I said maybe consciousness and unconsciousness. So if the back is unconscious, the parts where we're unconscious that's exactly where in our personalities, beings, that's exactly where the klipot, the external forces, or that's where we lose our energy. That's where our energy can be sucked off because we're not conscious there. We don't know what's going on. So we might be feeding other forces other than the good of our own person, not feeding other sources in the sense of helping others, but real energy, energy like suckers. I can't remember the word for them. I remember it in Hebrew.
Vampire.
Yeah.
Vampire?
Yeah, it's sort of like a vampire. No, but like leeches, that's what I wanted. Leeches, they're like energy leeches. So when, and where they leech from is from the back. So let's just go on. He has a quote here, I'm going to skip that. Vihine, im kodem yetzirat adam harishon, hayu zun, bebechinat panim bepanim, if before the first human being was created, if the male and female, now here he is differentiating between the two, the divine male and female would have been face to face, hayu achoreihem megulim, their backs would have been exposed. Vayu klipot ne'achazot sham ma'od, and the klipot would be leeching onto them very much. V'lachen, therefore, kedei shelo yitachazu klipot ba'achoreihem, in order that the klipot would not be holding, leeching onto their backs, hu tzruchu lihidabek achor ba'achor, dibuk mamash gamur, min hachazeh dezer anpin ulamata kenoda. Va'az, I'm just going to read it, va'az al yedei kach, eina klipot yicholim likanes benatayim, kidei lihitachez sham ba'achoraim shelehem. And therefore, in order that the klipot should not be able to leach onto their backs, so they need to be clinging back to back from the chest down, and then the klipot cannot come between them in order to grasp their backs whatsoever. In other words, to put it in other words, this stance of back to back that we find the male and female in, and again, I think he might even be going back before the Nesirah. We'll see how this plays out in the rest of the text. But what we need to understand now is that this back-to-back position is a defensive posture. It's a defensive posture. You know, you have that a lot. You see that sometimes in movies when, like, the heroes, like, they'll stand. I saw it in some Marvel movie, Dafka, with a male hero and a female, like they're like standing back to back because, you know, to cover that's, I got your back. They say, I'm holding your back. I got your back. It's defensive. It's defensive because they can, if you see the klipot, you're facing them, you can deal with them. The problem is when you have your back to them and then you can't deal with them. So if you see, we have here a sort of paradoxical, we have like a bind. We have a bind here. We have a bind for the divine male and female. They have to be back to back in order to deal with the klipot, all these, they could be the non-embodied spirits, or they could be, you know, God created darkness and there was like good and evil, and I mean, it's going to become good and evil after eating from the tree. But there are these other entities, forces in the creation that want to suck off energy. They're there. Let's not even go in why they're there. They're there. And so they need to be back to back in order to sort of fight off or deal with these klipot. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, this then is an impediment, prevents them from being face to face, which is when they can couple and have a full relationship. So they're in a bind. The divine male and female, Zeir Anpin and Nukva, are in a bind. Okay, questions?
Well, you could say that they were in a bind since the moment that it was created by Kenegdo in some ways.
Exactly, exactly. Yes, they were in a bind from the moment of creation. Can anybody guess how this knot is going to be untied? What might be the way out of this bind?
Lie down.
No, it's a little more complicated than that. Take a nap. It's like, bye.
But let me ask a quick question. What is the connection with between the back to back and what you said that the front is Chesed and the back is Gevurah and the front is Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei, and the back is Elohim? Like, how do all these pieces come together?
So basically what I'm doing now without too much explanation is I'm just, doing, setting up the chain of association. So I'm not going to go into it, but too much, like, what does that mean? The front is chesed. The chesed, well, in general, the chesed is more of the light, and the gvurah is more of the darkness. So where the eyes are facing, that's the light, and the back is the darkness. And in terms of names of God, so Yud He Vav He, Havaya, that will always be Chesed or Rachamim, and Elohim will always be Din or Gvurah. This is why, as of the second chapter in Bereshit, the first chapter of Bereshit is all Elohim. It doesn't say the name Havaya, the name Yud Vav He. It's only beginning to be used in the second chapter. And that has to do with it being, it's not only Din, but also the Chesed. Look, this is all like major chapters in this thing, but that's sort of what it is. Okay, anybody else?
Well, it seems like what's necessary to generate the power to not have to be in that defensive back-to-back stance is that the feminine has to be fully regrown, has to be fully grown, has to be fully empowered in a sense.
Not enough. That's not going to do the job, because actually in this particular picture, she has become empowered, not fully. She's on her way, but she has developed into 10 sfirot, and still they need to be back to back, because now both of them have to be dealing with the klipot. So that's not her, it's not enough just for her to be fully developed. I think maybe I should say, you know, it's going to be a little bit of a teaser and a spoiler for next week, but I think maybe I should say that this also connects very much with what David asked at the very beginning. So the way out of the bind is going to be human beings. Human beings are going to be the way out of this bind. In other words, it says, it's going to go in the verse, V'adam ayin la'avod et ha'adama. At the beginning of creation, there was not yet a human being whose job is to till the earth, to work the earth. Because one of the ways of describing the klipot is thorns or weeds in the garden. That's one of the images for them. So when human being comes along, so the human being's job is to be a gardener and basically, like, you know, come out with the what do you call that? I'm forgetting my English. That you use to cut down weeds. You know, this big thing that you.
The scythe
Weed
or
whacker.
The scythe, yeah, a scythe, yeah.
weed whacker.
Yeah, okay. So human being comes out, starts like seeing, okay, what is vegetables, what is trees, and what is weeds, and gets rid of them, gets rid of the klipot. So the Adam, through that is one of the main also spiritual, the reasons for all spiritual endeavor is to like make seder, make order in the garden, in the earth garden. So then Zer Anpin and Nukva, this divine couple, don't have to be concerned with being in this defensive position, and they can allow themselves to turn around and be face to face. So it all becomes dependent on human beings. This is where, and this in fact, in the Ari's understanding, one of his deeper explanations of what creation is about. In other words, for the Ari, also based on the Zohar, a huge empowering of human beings. It's as if God did everything till the last stage, and the last stage is dependent on human beings. And if human beings don't do their job, the whole thing is not going to work. That's, you know, that's what the amazing thing of creation is, that it's as if Kaviyachol, God gave up or foregoed on part of God's, like, you know, ineffability and all powerful and impotent and all those words, and omnipotent, all those words. It's as if that's Tzimtzum. It's as if God left a little space where he said, okay, this is up to people. And the completion of this process of creation is in our hands, basically. If we're doing our work in the garden, if we're becoming the Mayim Nukvim, the feminine waters of the Shekhinah, then the whole thing is going to work. It'll start at the bottom, and it'll like trickle up. Not trickle down, it'll trickle up. And that's what's supposed to happen. And if we're not doing that, the whole thing falls apart, basically. And of course, I'm talking in two extremes. And there's a lot of things, you know, a lot of points between those two extremes, okay? But that's basically what it is, and that's how things look. The idea is that even if people are really, really not doing their job, there's a sort of minimum that we call kiyum v'ha'ada. There's like a minimum in the system, built into the system. There's like a minimal amount of like mayim nukvin, those feminine waters that just keep the thing running. But it keeps it running on a really, really lowest common denominator level. And what human beings can do is to upgrade it all the time, make it better. In other words, in the words of the Zohar, it calls it not just survival, but bracha v'chidu, or bracha v'chiru. That is to say, blessing and joy, or blessing and freedom can become part of it. It's not just survival. It can also be blessing, freedom, and happiness and joy. That's dependent on human beings. There are moments in history where even that basic survival, mayim nukvin, is threatened also. That also happens over history, but I don't want to go there now. That's the picture, and as you see, there's a lot of vulnerability here of the entire system being made dependent on human beings. Okay, anybody else want to say something? Stacy.
I'm overwhelmed. I mean, it's beautiful, and I'm just breathing because it feels like this is the drama. This is now, and couldn't be a more relevant text. And I'm wondering about if Mayim Nukmiyim is Kundalini. You know, I don't know, right? If they talk about it, but if it's the Chi, you know, the raising of the Chi, and I don't know, it's just profound drama. And also to hear that the Ari was such a feminist is surprising to me. I'm happy to hear that. It's a relief. So
okay, you must remember.
That's my opinion so far. I haven't read all of him. But.
No, you know, but you have to remember though that I know it almost sounds like that, but this is a 16th century person, you know, and yet basically, you know, I've asked myself, like, you know, why is that his agenda? Because many of our texts will be not like that at all, because they reflect this, you know, the social and cultural mores of their time. And why for the Ari, also for the Zohar and Tikkunei Zohar even more, but the Ari specific, why is this so big on his agenda? And it comes, of course, not because of having 21st century feminist values. It's because of his great love for the Shekhinah. They cannot bear they cannot bear the idea that that the Shekhinah should in any way be inferior, lessened, or dependent on any other partsuf for her light. They see that as a anomaly, as something, you know, incorrect in the whole way the thing was set up. I often think that part of what happened, let's say, in our time or the past century, is that for the Ari and also from the Zohar, the feminine is very much an imaginary feminine. In other words, for them, it didn't come down to actual women. Although I am certain the Ari really loved and respected his wife just because of the way he writes about very intimate things. Describing them. I have no doubt about that. But given that, when he's talking, it's not women so much. I think by our time, what happened is that we realize that all this talk of Shekhinah and all this drama, as you say, can actually be like the Shekhinah is women. The Zohar says it. The Zohar says that Shekhinah is Neshei Alma, the women of the world. But again, it's sort of in the mind. It didn't really make it all the way down to these physical bodies. And I think that's one of the things that's happened in our time and is happening, I would say. Okay, anybody else? Okay, I think we're going to leave it here for today because it feels like it's a lot of things to digest, to take in. The only thing I want to remind you once again is that this whole drama is playing itself out on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, on Rosh Hashanah. This is why these texts have to do with Rosh Hashanah. And we'll tie it in next week we'll tie it together and how it fits in, even a little bit how it fits into the tefillah of Rosh Hashanah, the machzor, the prayer, because one of the things the Ari likes to do is to take this drama, which he's describing now, and then fit it in to the prayer service. And every stage of the tefillah, whether it's more shachrit, mincha, or ma'ariv, becomes like another scene in this movie that's happening. And it's funny because the tefillah, the prayer book, the siddur, sort of becomes like the soundtrack of the movie. In other words, the words themselves of the siddur or the machzor become, like I said, they're not the story. They're like the soundtrack. The Ari is telling us a story. This is the story. This is what's happening on Rosh Hashanah, what he's talking about now. Because as he'll say next week, this relives itself every year when Rosh Hashanah comes around. So this is the movie. This is the script. This is what's going on. The words of the tefillah written down in the siddur, they're the soundtrack. And you know, a soundtrack in a movie, it's not always one-on-one. Like you're not going to see a scene like someone meets someone and they won't be singing, oh, he met her. It can be, it fills it out, the soundtrack, in a different way. It relates, but it's not, as I said, always one-on-one. And that's the kavanot tefillah in the Ari. The kavanot, the intentions, the meditations on the tefillah are basically saying what's actually going on. And then the siddur, the words, are just the background. Okay? Yes.
Can I make a comment? Just, so this is what's so interesting about the way this happened in this class is that we went right from first 2 and almost a half classes, like half or so was up to now. I mean, it was almost everything up now was Zohar. It's like the beautiful, flowing, mystical, poetic, multi-interpretation of Zohar, both the way you presented it and from our own possible understandings. And I'm just super down with it, And then we do this switch over to Ari. And suddenly I feel like we're like mechanics in overalls with grease on us and these big monkey wrenches, and we're like getting into and like there's all these technical, super technical things, and all these, even the nikudot, everything comes with chipchuks, everything, right? Like if you weren't saying all these things, and luckily many of them are repeated over and over again, so I can get them into my brain, panim al panim, all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, this is like super instructional manual and much less intuitively comprehensible for me,
So good. I'm very happy. Yeah, you really almost took the words out of my mouth on this one, because this is exactly what happens in the transition between the Zohar and the Ari. For this reason, for this very reason, believe me, this piece that I brought is actually one of the pieces in the Ari. It's almost Zoharic. How can I say? The Ari is so much mechanics. This is nothing compared to what he usually does. And this is the reason that many people who love Zohar and are teachers or even professors of Zohar do not like to learn Kabbalat Ari. First of all, it's very trying. It's a great effort. You really have to, if you don't have a mind, there are minds that like this sort of stuff, these, high resolution details, almost mathematical, mechanical structures. There are minds that love this sort of thing. Let me just say that's not mine. I don't connect to this sort of stuff naturally. And it distances a lot of like potential students of the Ari. And I have in Israel, here in Jerusalem, I have a group of Zohar teachers, basically, in all sorts of different frameworks, universities, yeshivot, all sorts. And we've been learning now Kitvei Ari for about 5 years or 6 years, once a week on Thursdays. And my job is like to mediate that or to intermediate the Kitvei Ari. And why? why, if there's that beautiful Zohar, would I want to do that? And I'm speaking personally right now, because as I said, I'm not like a mechanic in overalls, you know, for this sort of thing. Because, not to say that all Kabbalah since the Ari, you know, is influenced by the Ari, but not only because of that, but because if you get through this stuff in the Ari, there is such incredible mythical content. Or this is a great example. There's ideas here that nobody else is saying, like what Stacy was saying before about this whole feminine drama here. Who has descriptions like that? So basically what I found is that it's worth making the effort and learning this language that literally I break my teeth on, now less so, but certainly over the years till I understood it. Because what you get out, what you might find there is incredible, you know, for me. Chassidut did that. The Baal Shem Tov and the Chassidim did that. They were all, they knew Kabbalah Ari, most, you know, Art Green says later on less so, but certainly the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid and many of his students were masters of Kabbalah Ari, and they did a tremendous job of taking concepts from the Ari, more than from the Zohar, and turning them into things that anybody could understand. So they were great mediators of that. However, you know, I always say, like, they took, in Chassidut, they took a few of the ideas, like Shvirat HaKelim and Tzimtzum, and they made those into, like, common venue, like sound bites. But there's so much more gold in this mine. There's so much more mythic, fascinating material that they didn't do that with. And this is why I find it interesting, but it's very important when it's like shifting gears. When you go from the Zohar, you described it very well, David. When you go from the Zohar into the Ari, you have to like stop a moment. I should have said this and say, wow, this is like a totally different language now. And we need to get through that language barrier to get the ideas that are here and see if they're interesting for us.
I have two quick questions. One is, like, obviously we're doing 4 quick sessions with you and we probably won't do this for a while. What do you think of Sar Yudit Schneider's book on the Kabbalistic significance of the masculine and feminine as a way for some of us if we wanted to keep studying this? Do you like that book?
Yes, okay. Excellent book. Excellent.
And my other question, you can address this next week, is a little bit of the difference with the Ramchal versus, because his stuff is, I think, a little more accessible. Yeah, I've got the same. Yeah, I've gone through it once, that book. So yeah, it's actually really complicated. But I've also, I'm just curious if you can comment on Luzzatto as opposed to Chaim Vital as a way in.
Right. Well, first of all, everything of Luzzatto of the Ramchal is based on Chaim Vital, you know. And the Ramchal, first of all, I do not consider myself an expert on the Ramchal. I've read him, not super extensively. I've read quite a few things he's written, but I haven't like gone over them over and over, and I don't feel like I'm that qualified to speak about him. But in general, my personal feeling was that the Ari, as systematic and mechanical as he is, leaves a lot of open ends, because he's like going on, and I like that, because it's something very dynamic, and it's an open system. As mechanical as the system is, it's still very open and changing. And my sense of the Ramchal was like he was trying to close those open ends, like to tie those open ends and create like a workable system that made sense from beginning to end. And for me, it takes something out of the Ari that I like, that isn't so well tied together. But again, that's just my personal sense of the Ramchal. So I'd rather that, you know, the small amount of time that my mind can take this sort of stuff. So I'd rather devote it to the Ari himself and some of his direct students rather than the Ramchal.
Okay. So my question is about Cordovero, and is that a link between Zohar and the Ari?
Yes,
Would
absolutely.
help us in some.
The Ari studied by Cordovero himself for a limited period of time, and he mentions him, I think, 4 times in his writings with Birkat HaChaim. In other words, part of when the Ari is writing himself, Rav Moshe Cordovero is still alive. And so he did regard him as his teacher, or at least, you know, the greatest Kabbalist around at the time. And both the Ramak, Rav Moshe Cordovero, and the Ari said, if you ask them, what do you do for a living, or what do you, they'd both say, we're just explaining Zohar. We're not developing new systems. We're just commentators on the Zohar. They thought they're explaining Zohar. And that's what the Ramak definitely did, and that's what the Ari thought he was doing. And having said that, the Ari had no problem taking issue with the Ramak on basic issues. And basically at some point he felt, and history sort of bears him out, that what the Torah that he was bringing down was something that was really going to change all of Kabbalah, and it did. You know, the Ramak is like a huge mikubal, and he says amazing things. And when I'm trying to understand a piece in the Zohar, I'll always want to hear what the Ramak says, you know, about it. And he's really so impressive. I have no words to describe. Yet, the one who brought down like a Torah that really hyper, you know, evolved Kabbalah consciousness was the Ari. To this very day, he's the inspiration. Okay, maybe one more, if there's one more person wants to say something, and then I think we can let this sit and ferment in us like good wine.
Well, just one more thing, unless somebody else wants to jump in. Do you think that, how do I ask this question? Do you think that they stopped short, the Kabbalists, of naming women for political reasons? Do you think that they hadn't evolved enough yet to respect female consciousness? Or do you think that it's possible that the Ari wasn't aware, these are hard questions, but wasn't aware of that he was channeling something for the future?
He was definitely aware he was channeling something from the future, but I don't think he could have imagined in what way. In other words, you know, people's ideas about things are very formed by their social, cultural context. And just like, who knows what's going to be in 400 years from now? And I'm sure in 400 years from now, it's a very good chance that they're going to look at like the edge and cusp of what we think is the most like open, you know, consciousness now, and think, what limited barbarians, you know? So I think what limited him from doing that was it was not imaginable or thinkable in that social, cultural context at that time. He was limited by that, just as we are limited now by ours. However, somehow, because I guess of Ruach HaKodesh or prophecy or whatever, that he channeled those foundations which we can build on, and hopefully future generations will build on what we do. I think that's just the way it happens. And again, having said that, he had a huge respect for female consciousness. And again, I think within his social context, as much as I can sense from the way he writes, he was not in the least bit disrespectful. I think he was very respectful and loving, at least towards his wife, you know, and probably, you know, women in general, but certainly not in a 21st century way. Okay, I hope that answers that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Abraham. That was
Okay.
great.
Thank you.
Okay, so see you all next week, and
Thank you so much.
you know, even if you didn't get it all, but I hope some of it got through. This is like this is dense stuff. Okay. So,
Bye, stay
shalom,
cool.
shalom.
So much.
Thank you.
Shalom,
Bye.
thank you so
Good
much.
evening, everybody.
Okay.
Shalom, shalom.